So today what we're going to talk about is basically the installation of the SCCM and the site role configuration. So today we're going to understand configuration manager site and the new approach to hierarchical design, construct a configuration manager hierarchy, determine when to expand a hierarchy and when to simply add a site system role for additional services, to deploy and configure the various site system roles available per site. So first of all, let's understand the different site types. So site servers fall into one or two categories: a standalone primary or a central administration site. So, oh, my screen is gone again, has it? So bear with me. Let's go back. It looks like I had some connection issues. Let's try this again. Let's try this again. Hopefully, my screen stays this time. But I think it's because the quality of my connection. My connection looks like it's pretty good now. It looks like Midburn is Midburn and Transing. They're fluctuating. Maybe mine was as well, but for whatever reason, it was interrupting my display. Let's keep on going and see how we go. So, like I said, there's two types of sites. There's the primary standalone site or a central administration site. The primary standalone site is the only site type where clients can be directly assigned, whereas the secondary server, there's no way of directly administering a second site. All administration would have to come from administration console connected to the primary site. So with this, obviously we're talking about primary, there's also a secondary site servers, but all administration is actually done on the primary site server. Then there's the CAS or central administration site. A central site server is the one at the top of the hierarchy and is used to centrally administer the entire implementation. The central or the CAS, central administration site, should not have any clients directly assigned to it. The central site server is no longer present. It has been replaced by a new type of server known as a central administration site. Not required until your organization has reached a large number of clients. So when we're implementing site servers, there's software requirements as with any software. And obviously, here's a link to a more detailed explanation. Looks like I've lost sharing again. And I'm not sure what's going on. So there's a link to the more information on the requirements of implementing SCCM and the software requirements. But basically, we need Active Directory domain. So this System Center Configuration Manager is not something you would install on a small network. It's not even something you would install in a sort of medium-sized network. It's really for the larger network where you have lots of client machines and possibly a distributed locations, a bit like if you think about TAFE and how we have many client computers in the thousands, literally, and we have multiple sites. We need Active Directory. That the benefits and the benefits of having SCCM is not really, and the cost of SCCM is not that advantageous if you don't have a sufficiently large enough environment. The site servers must be deployed on a 64-bit hardware. Obviously, most things are 64-bit now, so that shouldn't be much of a problem. We need the .NET frameworks, 3.5 SP1 and 4.0 must be installed. So these are things basically you need on your servers before you can have it. You can actually even put the SCCM software on there. So if you look at your workstation here, worksheet here, you can see that part of actually configuring the CCM server is some basic configuration, but it's actually we're preparing the Active Directory by creating the specific container for it for the site management. We're actually then adding some delegations in for preparing the Active Directory again, and then we're actually gonna start the installation. But before we do that, we've actually had to extend the schema of the Active Directory. So if you remember, the schema was basically the schematic or the blueprints for what objects can be created in an Active Directory. By having this by SCCM, we are actually needing the schema to be extended to include more objects that we normally don't have. We are then using the Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit. So you might have remembered that from your for when we use the USMT. But again, this contains software requirements that's actually required for the SCCM to be installed. You can see we need the deployment tools, the Windows pre-installation. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on, guys. It must have something to do with my internet. Yeah, it could be weather. So it's raining pretty hard here. So it might be creating, intermittent disruptions to my link. It could possibly be as well. So I'm not sure. Just tell me when my screen goes off, and I'll reshare it again. It seems to be. I sometimes can't tell. I just keep on talking because obviously I can see what I'm talking about. But just yell out, say something if my screen goes off. Okay, so that's the best we can do. It hasn't been a problem up until the second. I've had 3 classes this morning. But no, this is the 3rd class. I've had 2 other classes this morning, and it hasn't been an issue. So what I'm trying to demonstrate and show you is that with this worksheet of actually just getting the SCCM onto your system, you have a lot of things to do. Preparing Active Directory, as well as installing these prerequisite software. And look at that. So what we need here out of this Windows Assessment Deployment Toolkit is the Windows PE, the Windows pre-installation environment, the deployment tools, and the user state migration tool. Once we install that, then we're going to add the WebS, the WSUS, the Windows deployment services. So if you remember from Monday, or if you watch the video from Monday, we're saying that this SCCM is a centralized administration tool. Actually integrates with a lot of the tools we already have used. For IIS, if you remember, is the web server. The WSUS we've used. The Windows deployment services is something new, but that's basically the ability to deploy, again, operating systems through the network. I see I got a question there. Let me just share it again. So these tools will be on the same server. Yeah. So basically, those tools can be the WSUS and the Windows deployment can be on different servers, definitely. But the IIS has to be on the same server. So you don't have to have the WSUS on the same server as long as there is a WSUS in the environment. And the Windows deployment services can be on another server as well, but probably it's a little bit better if it's on the same server. In our situation, because we don't want to end up with 6 or 7 different virtual machines, what we're trying to do in this lab is to actually place it all on the same virtual machine, if you know what I mean. Okay. So there's more. So besides those roles, there's you got your bits, which is your background intelligent transfer service, your remote differential compression, and then there's the .NET frameworks we were talking about. And then these are some of the configurations. As you can see, there's a lot of prep work. WSUS, so it's almost doing a lot of the things we've done before, and it needs an SQL server. So you can see that it's getting pretty complicated. The SCCM is getting pretty complicated. It needs an SQL server as well to store the configuration as well as the information. But that SQL server, again, doesn't have to be on the same server. In this case, again, to minimize the amount of virtual machines and to simplify our topology, we are putting on the same server. The reality is they don't have to be on the same server. Again, some firewall rules or disabling of the firewall, and then installation of the SQL server, some basic configuration of the SQL server, and then finally, after completing the SQL server, yep, we're still going. The SQL Server Management Studio, and then after that, some more configuration with that as far as the ports goes. Then finally, it's not until part 6 and page 31 of the 44-page worksheet that we're actually installing the SCCM configuration and endpoint protection manager. And this walks you through all of that. So what am I trying to say? I'm just trying to say that the worksheets for this subject is actually very involved. Okay, so that was 40-odd pages of worksheets. Obviously, not all of that is written. A lot of that is pictures as well. But it's a 41-page worksheet alone. So basically, you do need to devote some time to doing the worksheets. Now, I can tell you now, with the worksheets, there will be parts of it where there's a lot of waiting. Because once we actually install SCCM on there, we have to also update it. Okay, it's like we've got a version of it, but there's obviously updates to this current version we've got with newer updates, so we have to apply those updates as well. So here's a list. Like I said, the .NET frameworks, XML core services, remote differential compression, and SQL server. So basically the process, like I sort of described on the worksheet, we extend the Active Directory schema. We delegate permissions. We install the WSUS, which is the Win Security Update Service, so where we can manage and deploy Microsoft updates to Microsoft products on the network. We install the Windows deployment assessment and deployment toolkit. And we need deployment tools, the Windows pre-installation environment, Windows PE, and the USMT, the user state migration tool. We need all of those because, like I said, SCCM is the functionality of all of these things so that we can actually use one system to deploy, to migrate, and do all those kind of things. We need to create a system management container. So this is actually used by this site for storing and publishing data such as boundary information. Boundary information is basically what is within the boundary, what is not within the boundary, so we actually can deploy and contain or constrain the deployments that we make. We can also be installed manually, or let the manager prerequisite tool do it. We need to configure this no SMS on drive.sms. You'll see that it's in the worksheet. Basically, that we need to select the volume that has the largest amount of space available at the time of execution, and during the processing of various tasks, we can select this by placing this file on that volume. So it seems a little bit old-fashioned. By placing a file on the volume, we are actually selecting the drive. Implementing this a centralized administration site. So it is expected that more than a single primary site will need to be included in the deployment. If the answer is yes, then the very first site that you create must be a centralized administration site. If the CAS is at the top, is the top site in the hierarchy, and is used solely for administration of the hierarchy. No clients or client-related functions are possible from the centralized administration site. If there is any expectations of joining multiple primary sites hierarchy relationship, then the CAS must be the server installed. If it's not installed, you should plan to expand the standalone primary site to a CAS at a later time. Implementing a secondary site. Secondary sites historically have been used to allow local access to distribution points of slower WAN links. Oh my goodness, I'm not sure why this is happening all the time. Yeah, so the secondary sites allow for access to distribution points. Distribution points are where basically client computers access installation files. Distribution points are where they get updates, where they report their status to. So these distribution points are basically important, are very important in order for this client computers to be able to get access to content. The secondary site installation allows communications of content from the primary site to be compressed and the sender to throttle communication across sensitive or slow WAN links. If the WAN links are too fragile to tolerate client traffic, as policy data is retrieved from the management point, the discovery and inventory data is uploaded to the management point. An example of such a condition would be facilities such as a cruise ship relying on an unstable satellite connection or communication. So as we go through these topics, you'll realize there's going to be various things which they call points: discovery points, management points, distribution points. So these are the terms that they will use, and these various points, as they call it, is for specific purposes. Verifying proper site installation. So the administration console for the CAS shows all sites listed and expected in an active state. So for example here, you can see that it's talking about the various sites, the primary, secondary sites, and whether they're active or not, and basically the site code. You can see the secondary site has a parent site, and this is the parent site, which is the primary site. And also, once you've installed it, there's a couple of registry locations are important for validating the proper installation. So some of the registry keys which are created in the registry. So if you don't know what the registry is, that's effectively the Windows configuration. So all your configuration, doesn't matter what graphical user interface you use to configure the settings of your computer, your Windows operating system, they ultimately save in these registry keys. And you'll also have some files or file system locations that are created for you. What's going on? So the file system locations, so you can go to the program files. There'll be a Microsoft Configuration Manager location. There'll be a SMSCCM location, as you can see here, and that will be placed for you. So basically, if you're not sure if your configuration, your installation has progressed or completed, you can actually use these various ways to verify that the proper site installation has occurred. And then there is the groups that are created. Okay, so these groups are created in your Active Directory. So we can use the Windows Management Instrument validation. We can validate that's installed by looking at the Windows DMI. So these things, the SMS is what Configuration Manager used to be called in the past. So you can see that it's still maintained the naming structure there. These groups are created, and these WMI properties are also created. Fine, and also we can validate the service is installed correctly by checking that the services, such as these ones again related to SMS, are actually placed on our server, and obviously they should be automatic, most of them, and they should be running. If you remember, we said that the SCCM requires a database, the SQL database. So we can actually once we have to have an SQL database, and when SCCM is installed, it actually creates its tables that it requires in the SQL database. And by examining the tables, we can see that it's again a way of verifying that it's installed correctly. Understanding Configuration Manager site system roles, so component servers, cannot be added or removed manually. Can run specific threads and support other roles, such as the management point. So the management point, as I said, you have all these things which I call this point, that point, whatever point. But the management point is where we as administrators manage their CCM. And there's the distribution point, which stores file content and makes it available to the clients. So let's say we want to deploy a piece of software across the network through SCCM. We would have to make sure that the installation files and the configuration files for it, the configuration settings for it, are located on the distribution point. And that distribution point requires at least a Server 2012 R2 or higher, Active Directory, that background intelligent transfer service, web service, and the distribution points may be installed on a supported server or client operating system. Understanding configuration and management site system roles, and then the management point. Okay, the management point, clients use the management point to retrieve and send all data to and from the assigned site server. Okay, so if you don't get that, that basically is how our SCCM sends instructions to our clients. And this is where also the clients send its status. Okay, this includes receiving settings and configuration and updating the management point with its status. Every primary and secondary site must have at least one management point, obviously. The centralized administration site cannot host the management point. Okay, it can't be on the same server as the central administration site. Management points require access to the site database for certain operations. The management point requires local installation of the SIIS, which is the web server, to be installed. And management points makes use of the BITS when moving contents depending on the size to help impacting network utilization. So for us in our lab, your management point, your distribution point, and all the requirements for the SCCM are going to be on the same computer. Like someone asked for, the reality is they don't have to be on the same. They can be separated on separate servers and placed strategically on the networks that is closest to the client. So for example, we might have one management point for all clients, but we might have a distribution point placed on the subnet of all of the different types of clients. Maybe if you take TAFE, for example, we might have a student network. We might have a staff network. We might have Wi-Fi network, which are all separated from each other. So just to spread the load, we might place distribution point on each of those networks rather than relying on the one distribution point and having all clients go there. The site database server. So every configuration manager implementation will at least have one server running a site database role, and that's our SQL server. Okay, so like I said, ideally this would be on a different machine. Okay, John V is gone. Ideally this will be on a different machine, but for us, we're going to keep the same server for simplicity. But SCCM needs SQL Server. You'll find that many other high-level services, whether that's Virtual Machine Manager or your other things like that, needs the admin database. So there was a message there. Distribution points are controlled by. So can you ask that question? I can't understand that question. Distribution points are controlled by, like from DNS management point. So we're going to explore each of these a little bit more in depth using them. But the distribution point, like I said, contains the content of the configuration and installation of programs. Okay, who manages distribution point? You do, as in you, the administrator. And are you talking about computers or the person? Sorry, can you clarify? Do you mean the computer? Computers. Okay, so no, you got to understand these management, these distribution points are just computers where these contents are, and we use these the contents of the files and the software configurations from the management point. Okay, so we create configures, we create deployments, and then the client computers are accessing the resources from the distribution points. And you'll see when we do it, when we actually create a deployment, it has to be sent and updated to the distribution points first. So we use the centralized management, but these are the different, if you like, components that are used to give the contents out to the clients. All right, so we're talking about the database. So we need a database server, and it's the point of the database server is it stores all the client information and site configurations on there. So everything that we create, as far as he's back. As far as everything we configure, all this configuration is stored in the database, and this is how most high-level services work. Most simple services don't use a database, but most of the high-level ones does have a backend database. This database server requires Server 2012 or higher, the Microsoft SQL Server 2012 or higher, and the database service is the SQL Server component to be required, and it's installed to host the database. So what that last point is saying is that this SQL database shouldn't be used just like any other database. So if you've done any programming or any app development, you'll see that a lot of applications require backend databases as well to store information, and often they use SQL, Microsoft SQL Server. But if we're taking this database here, this is dedicated for the SCCM, not to be used for any other purpose. All right, so site servers cannot manually added or removed. Site servers manage all functions of the site and interacts with all remote systems hosting the site system roles for the site. The site system cannot be manually added or removed. The site server itself will always be a site system, as will any remote servers that are deployed to host various roles to provide the services needed by that site. So again, a couple of other different points. There's a state migration point, which provides a secure location to store user state information as part of operating system deployment. There's a fallback status point, which helps addresses today's greater security requirements while enabling the mechanisms to catch clients that are not communicating properly. Problems that are reported to the management point in the form of status or state messages provides an administrator with the insight into the installation and management of the clients, and works well because the location of the fallback status point is configurable in the command line when the client installation is initiated. So if for those of you who watched the video for session 1, if you remember, we talked about how there's a client, SCCM client software. This is a piece of software that's installed into the client computer, and this client is where is used to report the status back to SCCM, as well as it receives instructions from SCCM to actually perform certain actions. There's a reporting point, so provides integration with the configuration manager and SQL reporting service to facilitate reporting and publishing and rendering. So basically, reports, one of the biggest things about SCCM is the ability to report on compliance, on inventory, software metering, and all of those kind of things. We are able to view in simple reports and to gain a level of understanding of what's going on our network. There's an application catalog web service point, provides a software catalog service to users. So if you remember on Monday, I mentioned how if you were at a TAFE computer, you will see that there's usually a software center. And basically this software center gives us a list of all the software, for example, for me now, for my computer, that I can deploy from Microsoft, from TAFE SA. There's updates, there's operating systems, and there's even status of software that's already installed, and as well as operating systems. There's even web apps. So if you remember on Monday, we showed you how we can actually go to the store, the Microsoft Store. So these are cloud apps. Basically, we can use the SCCM to actually manage computers on the cloud. So here are some of the software that I can install, even not at this, not on site like we are all now. We can get an app from the Microsoft Store that that TAFE SA in this case has published to us, and basically that catalog web service point provides a software catalog, which is where that's accessing all the information. Application catalog website point acts as a connection point between the application catalog web service point and the systems and the configuration management site, providing software information to the website for presentation to the user. There's the enrollment point and the enrollment proxy point. So for mobile device management, so if you remember, one of the other benefits is that we can use SCCM to manage BYOD as well as Wi-Fi wireless enabled devices. For mobile device management, its enrollment proxy point is placed in the DMZ, demilitarized zone, and is the initial communication for devices. Devices finds the downloads a mobile version of the configuration management client, that bit of software again. The enrollment point installed inside the protection network and acts as an interface between the enrollment proxy and the enterprise certificate authority, as a certificate requests are presented for mobile devices and generate certificates that send back to the mobile devices. So the enrollment point is where we manage these mobile clients, but because the mobile clients may be on an untrusted network, like a wireless network, we use a proxy, which is actually placed in the DMZ, so that the enrollment point itself is not actually exposed to this untrusted network. Okay, there's a software update point. It's responsible for synchronizing all patches from the Microsoft updates, making them available to the configuration manager interface for deployment. So this is where SCCM again interacts with WSUS and allows us to deploy software updates to our clients. And the software update point participates in this. Endpoint point, available only at the CAS and requires a separate licensing in place. So the endpoint protection requires additional licensing, so additional costs, and enables the use of endpoint protection in the hierarchy. There's also asset intelligence and synchronization point, which assists in the latest as part of the System Center online catalog, enables synchronizing catalog updates from the internet, and also allows you to upload custom catalogs and request categorization information to Microsoft. So basically, it's a lot of information that I've given you today about these various components. And to be honest, all of this doesn't make sense until we start using them. Today is the first step. So basically, if we were in class right now, you would already have the virtual machine, and this is where we would actually start doing the labs. Okay, so for those of you who have got the virtual machines, what we're going to do is we're going to start doing the labs. For those of you who don't have the virtual machines, I want you to work out how you're going to get it, whether you're going to travel to the campus yourself, or whether you're going to try the external NAS. And I want you to get the virtual machine and the components. Just have a look at the next few worksheets, see if there's anything extra we need, and download it. Especially if you're doing other subjects. If you're doing other subjects, see what else you need, and it might be worth a trip to the TAFE campus in order to get the components you need.